Hello there, and welcome to this video on the Collapsing Anchors NLP change pattern. This is a great pattern for removing unhelpful and unwanted emotions. Like so many NLP patterns, it's simple to perform and doesn't need any specialist knowledge to get it to work. It does help if you understand what anchors are and how to create them, and I have a video coming out shortly that will cover everything that you need to know to be effective with anchors. The collapsing anchors pattern is useful for replacing negative and unproductive emotional states with more positive and productive ones. For example, removing hopelessness and substituting optimism in its place. I'm going to assume that you've already discussed with the client what the goals for the session are, and that any ecology checks or internal negotiations have already taken place. If you're running this as part of a therapy session, then you could take your time with it. But I found that for the best results, you want to do this pattern fairly quickly so that the client doesn't have time to analyze what is going on. So, step 1. Identify and anchor a negative emotional state. By this point in your session, you should already have a negative state that the client wants to deal with. Usually, this will be attached to an existing anchor or memory, and it is likely to have a negative impact on their life. You want to create an anchor for this emotion that is easy to access, as you're going to need to be able to fire off 2 anchors at once. Just as a general rule, when dealing with a negative emotion, don't have your client sitting in it for too long. Most clients have an internal process for dealing with negative emotions, and you want to anchor the emotion and not the follow-on process. Once you've set your anchor, move on to step 2. State break. Whenever you're dealing with strong emotions, you want to break that state before moving on to the next step. Otherwise, you can end up creating a cascade of emotions, which is really not what you want. A state break should be something you're comfortable with as an NLP practitioner, and just offering a drink or asking a simple, unrelated question is usually enough to break the client out of any emotional state. Step 3. Access a resourceful state. What would be a better state to be in than the negative emotional state? Would curiosity be a good alternative to anxiety? What about excitement instead of fear? The client will be able to tell you what they would like to feel instead of the negative state, and once you have it, you'll need to get the client to access the state so that in step 4 you can anchor the state. You're now going to create an anchor for the positive state, and at the same time you want to increase the intensity of the state so that you have the opportunity to anchor it at its peak. The more powerful the state, the easier to anchor, and the more powerful the state, the greater the impact when you collapse the anchor. You should spend some time here building the intensity and re-anchoring so that the state is easy to retrieve and as powerful as necessary. You're aiming for a highly intense state when the anchor is fired, and then it's on to step 5, which is another state break. This time you're breaking the client out of the positive state. The state break is a really common tool that you'll use a great deal when doing any kind of NLP pattern, so it's worth investing some time developing this skill. Step 6. Collapse the anchors. You'll need to follow these instructions carefully to get the right result. Fire off the negative anchor with a positive anchor coming immediately afterwards. This really has to be as short as possible, which is why it's important to be able to easily access both anchors. By accessing both anchors at the same time, the process should overload the unproductive state with the more productive state. If you watch the client, as you fire the anchors, you will see a great deal of confusion in their face as they try to reconcile the 2 opposing states. Keep the 2 anchors engaged for a few moments, then release the negative anchor and keep the positive state triggered for a little longer so that it covers any emotional tail of the unproductive state. Once you've collapsed the anchor, you can move on to step 7. Test the result. Break the state once more, and then you can either fire the anchor for the unproductive state or ask the client to try and recall the unresourceful state. In both of these cases, if you've got the collapsing anchor right, the client should be unable to access the negative state and they should flow automatically into the positive state. If it doesn't work or you get some unintentional side effects, maybe a mixture of the two states, then just run through the process again, increasing the intensity of the positive target state. Once you've got a successful result, you can revisit the positive state anchor and just bump up the intensity for the client and have them access it a few times. This just cements the feeling for the client. And that's it for the classic Collapsing Anchors NLP change pattern. And as with pretty much all NLP-based therapy, you'll probably spend more time discussing the client's issues and outcomes than you will running the pattern. I hope that you found this video useful, and if you'd like to see more, then please like and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye and good mental health.